sightings in ocean fronts. Basking sharks are known as being filter feeders that primarily feed on zooplankton and in particular crocodiles. They're found distributed globally in cold to warm temperate waters. They are classed as being the world's second largest fish and grow up to 11 meters, weighing up to 7 tons. Basking sharks are protected under the ESA's Species of Concern, CITES Appendix 2, and are on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. During summer months, basking sharks swim open mouthed on the surface of the water and can pass up to 1.5 million litres of seawater through their gills. They have a large liver that runs through their abdominal cavity and is filled with oil, which helps with their buoyancy. They migrate seasonally from deep waters to shallower waters, or from lower to higher latitudes during the warmer months, and tend to be seen basking on the surface either on their own or in small groups. Ocean fronts are where nutrients are brought to the surface and offer a high food supply. Typically, basking sharks choose areas where there's a high abundance of plankton. And because they are filter feeders, it's easier for them to access their food when it's on the surface, when it's in high abundance areas. An ocean front is when two different masses of water merge together to form an ocean front. They have different physical characteristics, which creates a different densities. Their different characteristics tend to be different salinity levels or temperature. Normally a front will show strong horizontal gradients of temperature and salinity, which will result in a variation of densities. In some cases, the front has a weak horizontal gradient on the surface, but will have a strong gradient on the below the surface. It's generally known that fronts increase primary productivity, and this tends to occur in nutrient-rich areas where the water is upwelled from deeper waters to more stable, shallower parts of the surface and the water column. This is more common in areas where the surface water is over a shelf slope region, where deep nutrient-rich waters by the continental shelf slope will be moved upwards over the shelf slope boundary, where it can fuel primary productivity. In the Cornwall region, basking sharks are known to feed on Calanus hellenodicus and Calanus finmarchicus, but more so in Calanus hellenodicus in the region of Cornwall, which I studied. They usually have a northern distribution boundary of 14 degrees centigrade and have a population optimum lying between 10 and 20 degrees centigrade. They are becoming more abundant in the North Sea, but populations have been declining by 70% since the 1960s. Calanus hellenodicus is typically a warm water cobioid species, and Calanus finmarchicus is typically a cold water cobioid species, but they seem to be moving more towards the Cornwall area. My project aim was to look at what the relationship was between basking shark sightings and ocean fronts. I looked at satellite readings of ocean fronts where basking sharks were seen, and this was provided to me by Plymouth Marine Lab, which enabled me to compare frontal activity to the sightings. The data that I've received was given to me by Marine Discovery Penzance and was comprised of 7 years worth of data between the dates of April 2007 and June 2014. At each sighting, the date, time, longitude, latitude, and the number of sharks were recorded, as well as any other environmental conditions that may have affected the sightings. The data that I had received was presence-only data, meaning that the data of the sightings were only observed on that specific day. The map behind me shows these sightings, and the red dots indicate where the sightings had come from. The data that was collected by Marine Discovery Penzance was sent to Plymouth Marine Lab, which was given to Peter Miller, who processed the data using an algorithm. The algorithm assessed sightings in comparison to the distance to the nearest front, the intensity of the front, the stability of the front, and whether or not the sightings were on the cold or warm side of the front. The data set was manipulated into a format that displayed the date, time, longitude and latitude, and the number of basking sharks seen. This was given to me in 4 CSV files that looked at how close the sightings were to the nearest front, what side of the front the basking sharks were seen on, the front density and the front gradient density. With this data, I was able to run my own statistical analysis using a Crustal-Wallace test. The statistical test was chosen because my data was non-parametric. It evaluated the significant differences between the independent and dependent variables. In Excel, I revised each data set, removing the data that showed minus 999, like the top one. So I removed each of these because this showed missing data on those days, and this was due to cloud cover from the satellite readings. Once I had done this, I arranged the data into ascending order and assigned a rank to each value. The sum of each rank was then calculated and applied to the equation above. The results that I had received from Plymouth Marine Lab came in 4 different data sets. The first was front density. This showed the strength of the fronts that were detected. The frontal strength was given to me in arbitrary units, which showed a combination of their thermal gradient and persistence. From the Crustal-Wallace test, we saw that there was a strong relationship between the strength of the front and the number of sharks sighted, with a K value of 64.86 and a P value of 0.01, which shows that there was a very high significance. The front gradient density was presented to me with a gradient magnitude of the fronts that were detected. These were spatially smooth so that the continuous distribution of the frontal activity could be seen. Again, as the same as the front density, the results show that there was a direct correlation between the number of sharks sighted and the gradient magnitude of the fronts that were present. We see that there is a K value of 35.12 and a P value of 0.0014. The front distance shows that the number of basking shark sightings in relationship to the closest major front, and this was determined using a simplified version of a frontal strength map. We see that there is a positive correlation between the 2 factors, with a K value of 66.52 and a P value of 0.00001. With the front side, it indicated whether the location was on the low or high value of the front, or whether it was directly on the front. This was shown with a -1 being on the cold side of the front, and a +1 being on the warm side of the front, and 0 being indicated that the sightings were directly on the front. I couldn't do a Crustal-Wallace test on this particular data set, as there was only 1 set of data. There was nothing to compare it to, as all of the sightings were on the warm side of the front. However, I did find that the highest mean number of sharks were sighted 3 kilometers away from the nearest major front, and this is seen in the second table and represented in the graph below. I concluded from my results I've obtained that there was a clear relationship between the presence of an ocean front and basking shark sightings. I saw that the stronger the front, the more sharks were present at that particular location, and they were also more likely to be found on the warmer side of the front rather than on the cold side. All of this is an indication to the richness of nutrients and the high abundance of food in these areas. Again, showing that there is a positive correlation between the presence of an ocean front and basking shark sightings. Because my data was presence-only data, I was unable to compare these sightings to days where ocean fronts were not present, and to days where there may have been an ocean front but no basking shark sightings. This sort of result would have further enhanced my results that I already had by giving me something else to compare it to. I would have been able to see if the sightings were less, more, or the same on the days that there were no ocean fronts present. This would have given me a more accurate representation